Greetings, fellow travelers on the winds of time, and welcome back to Unrepentant Geeking. As always, I am your host, Shaun, and it's been a while. Too long of a while. That's what happens when you go on a 2-week cruise and then come back to a whole ton of work in your day job. Let that be the end of that explanation, and let's move forward, because we've got a lot of ground to cover, and not nearly enough time. So, let's begin discussing episode 1 of season 11 of Doctor Who, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Although, the funny thing about this episode and this season is that technically, this is the second time there's been a season 11 of Doctor Who, because why not? A show as timey-wimey, as it were, as this would of course engage in a little bit of paradox and nonsense on its own. Because after all, back in 1973, there was the original Series 11, starring the Third Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith. So, yeah, we've kind of been here before, and yet we've never been here before. Same but different, different but the same, and I can't think of a better description for this episode. This is a monumental episode of the series of Doctor Who, and not just for the obvious one, the fact that Jodie Whittaker is introduced in this episode. It's her first actual episode as the 13th Doctor, and of course she is the first woman to play the Doctor outside of a couple of non-canon, to varying degrees of funny attempts at comedy. But as I'm fond of saying, that is a story for another day. Regardless, Jodie Whittaker is not the only new thing about this show, nor are her companions about this episode. No, this is the first episode of the Chris Chibnall era, who has come in to take over as head writer and executive producer. So it's the first time, so Stephen Moffat has stepped down, but even further than that, also longtime composer Murray Gold has stepped away from the show as well. This is the first season in New Who that Murray Gold is not composing music for the show, and instead it's being done by Royal Birmingham conservative Segun Akinola. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. So basically, this is about as new as Who has been since Season 1, since Episode 1, Rose, which was, of course, the start of New Who. And as such, it's not surprising that what we get here is something very different from what you might expect from a normal episode of Doctor Who, even while being very familiar. How does that work? Well, basically, the look of the show and the sound of the show feels different, feels fresh, feels new. At the same time, the character at the heart of the show, the Doctor, remains very much the Doctor. Now, it's already clear she's going to be very much her own Doctor. She's going to have an attitude and behavior that is different from those who have come before, just like the 12th Doctor was different from the 11th and the 10th, and the 10th was different from the 11th and the 9th, and the 9th was different from the 6th and the 7th. That's business as usual for Doctor Who. Each Doctor puts their own spin on the character, each actor or actress puts their spin on the role, and all is right in the world. What will be bad for Who is when the character becomes static, when the character becomes locked in. No, Doctor Who, the Doctor, the character, the show are pretty much the incarnation of change. No matter how much you may like or dislike what's going on the series at any given moment, you can safely assume it's not going to be that way forever. Not even necessarily for very long. 3, maybe 4 seasons at most. Now, maybe those 3 or 4 seasons will stretch out over a longer period in terms of years, but still, Doctor Who is a series all about change. And sometimes that change is for the better, and sometimes it's for the worse. Now, I have been with Doctor Who. I've been a Whovian, I guess. I've been a fan. I've been watching the series since back around the 5th Doctor era. So I've been watching it for a good long while. And I've seen the ups, and oh, have I seen the downs. Have I seen the downs? Oh, yes. And I have to say that overall, as first episodes, as regeneration episodes go, The Woman Who Fell to Earth is a very strong beginning for this new Doctor, for this new era, and for the show in general. Now, is it the best Regeneration episode? No. I'm gonna have to be honest, that honor still goes to the 11th Hour. And it's no shame coming in second to that, because in my opinion, the 11th Hour, which was of course the episode that introduced us to the 11th Doctor, is easily in the top 10 all-time best episodes of this series ever, across old or new Who. And since we're talking something like 277 episodes, being in the top 10 is no small thing. I don't know if I'll ever... Okay, I can already go ahead and say The Woman Who Fell to Earth is not going to be in the top 10. I've only watched it once, and I will be watching it again. You can bet your bottom dollar. But yeah, it's not as good as the 11th Hour. But I would say that it ranks higher, definitely, than the Christmas Invasion, which was the Regeneration episode for the 10th Doctor. And I'd even rank it higher than Rose, which was the episode that introduced, of course, us to the 9th Doctor, to New Who, to a whole host of things, and was an episode that was incredibly vital to the series. And I'm not trying to take away from the 9th Doctor, that episode from Rose. That still remains a really strong introduction. That's how you bring a long-dormant series back successfully. It definitely, when you look back at it now, it's aged in some ways, because New Who's been around long enough now that, you know, we can actually be nostalgic for the early seasons of it, which is a weird feeling deep down in my gut. But that's Doctor Who for you. Regardless, Rose did an incredible job, but I do think that it has some flaws. And that's not to say The Woman Who Fell to Earth didn't have some flaws. So what's the basic setup? Well, okay, the general idea is that we follow along with 3 characters, technically 4, as they encounter aliens, well, technically 5 if you want to get, and then technically 6. Let's start over. Basically, a group of people end up encountering an alien on a train. And actually, they end up encountering 2. One of them is a strange tentacle thing. The other, the Doctor. One of them is friendly. Can you guess which one? Hopefully so. Hopefully so. Anyways, so they all encounter an alien and things kind of spiral out of control when the Doctor literally falls from the heavens as the titular Woman Who Fell to Earth, and somehow survives, I guess because she crashed into the alien. The show kind of hand waves over that, which, okay, I'm fine with. We know the Doctor was going to live. If they don't want to bother giving us some sci-fi technobabble explanation, I'm okay with that in this case, as long as it doesn't become a habit. And based on this episode, I don't think it will. Basically, from there, things spiral out of control, as it soon turns out that there's a second alien running around Sheffield, and looking to cause all sorts of trouble. It's killing people, and its reasons and motivations are not good. And so the Doctor and her new ad hoc companions set out to deal with this and hopefully get things back to whatever passes for normal. I don't really want to say anything more than that. I know I said full spoilers, but really, I can't recommend enough that you go out and you give this episode a watch. Whether you are a longtime Doctor Who fan or somebody who has never even watched the series and is barely familiar with any of it, overall, The Woman Who Fell to Earth works really well as both a reintroduction to the character and an introduction. It can work either ways, and that is no small trick. Now, of course, that's what a good Regeneration episode should do. The same was also true for Rose and for the 11th Hour, especially. Not so much the Christmas Invasion, which is why I don't rank it very highly. There's a lot of reasons, but that's a review for another day, perhaps. Point is, The Woman Who Fell to Earth does a good job of establishing who this new Doctor is and who her new companions are. Now, the companions are definitely not the deepest characters we've ever seen on this show. Not yet. But they are all interesting in and of themselves. By the end of the episode, tragedy binds them together, both with each other and with the Doctor. And, unsurprisingly, since they're introducing 3 companions, which is not something we've really had in any sustained way on Doctor Who in a long, long time, outside of an episode here or there. And that is, these 3 will be the ongoing companions for at least the entirety of this season, as far as we know. Regardless, since they are introducing 3 companions along with reintroducing the Doctor, there's not a ton of time to develop them, and we do give them some pre-existing connections so that, yeah, you can shortcut along their introduction to each other, and so it makes sense that they go along with each other so quickly. That's not a complaint, that's not a weakness, that's good writing. Because at the same time, these connections have some strains in them. They definitely are aware of each other to varying degrees, but they aren't necessarily the closest people in the world. In the case of two of them, they used to be friends in school back in what we would call here in the States elementary school. In the case of another two of them, they're grandfather and grandson, but only by marriage and only for 3 years. And so there is room for their relationships to develop and deepen between each other and, of course, along with the Doctor. And there's room to explore, but at the same time, we don't necessarily have to waste 20 minutes of the episode going along and have everybody introduce themselves to everybody and develop a bond between them and establish why on earth would these people ever risk their lives for each other. It all works. It moves along at a good pace. Now, again, not a perfect episode. There's one scene in the middle which feels completely extraneous, where you have a drunk guy confronting the alien menace and behaving in a way that only somebody on a television show or in a movie would behave to a strange figure in armor, especially in a show where aliens are at least theoretically semi-regular presences in this universe. I mean, how much the general public is aware of aliens in present-day Earth fluctuates as the writers need it, but in general, there's at least some idea that they are real, far more so than on our world, where there has never been, as far as we know, any proof of intelligent life out there, and based on recent events, intelligent life on here. But let's not get political. Let's not today. Anyways, that whole scene just feels pointless. The show does more than a good enough a job establishing the villain, making him a loathsome character, making him a legitimate threat to this little ad hoc team. We didn't need the scene. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't really go anywhere. I'm not really sure why it exists. Also, the editing at times is a little odd. There's a few odd cuts here and there, a few odd moments where the action doesn't quite flow as smoothly as I would have liked, especially during the finale. A character does something very heroic nominally, but unnecessarily, and I feel like I wonder if originally it was meant to occur sooner, because where it occurs in the episode now, it all feels kind of pointless. Maybe they're going for that extra tragedy. Regardless, still, this is a really good episode. It moves along, and it's gorgeous to look at. And it looks distinct and different. If you're a longtime fan of this show, or even if you're a lapsed fan, you take a look at The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and immediately it stands apart from pretty much any episode of New Who, or Old Who for that matter. It looks and feels unique, and that's great. That's exactly what you want from a show that is at where it is. It is basically reinventing itself once again. Just as we had a reinvention in the transition from the 10th Doctor to the 11th Doctor, where you had the new showrunner come in, we had Moffat come in, and the show took its own then unique turn. We are getting that once again, and the fact that we are, and that it is so strongly setting out to make its own stamp and its own identity this early on, and succeeding for the most part, speaks well for where we're going with Chris Chibnall as the showrunner. And I'm not surprised. Chris Chibnall has definite TV experience and quality TV experience, of course, where, Broadchurch and other things as well. And he wrote this episode, and the writing is strong. The writing is definitely one of the strengths of this episode. He does a terrific job letting the new Doctor set out who she is, discover who she is in proper regeneration episode, get a big speech at the end which makes it clear, puts a line under the idea that it will likely be driving this season at the very least, and maybe her entire tenure, reestablishing why she's the Doctor. There's a scene about halfway through where she basically rebuilds her famous sonic screwdriver, but this time from spare parts and scrap that she finds around a workshop. And while I'm kind of iffy on the design of the screwdriver itself, I love the scene otherwise. I love the idea that it really showcases just how intelligent and how scrappy and how good the Doctor is at what she does. That has not changed. But we also get some clear signs that this is not this is not quite a Doctor we've ever seen before. She seems to have taken the words of her direct predecessor about always being kind directly to heart, and that makes sense. At its best, a new Doctor is almost always in part, especially in the first season or two, a direct response to the Doctor that came before. Whether it's an opposite response or it's trying to take on what came before to learn from it, that is the way it should work. That's the way that's proven most effective. And this feels like a new start for the series, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily discarded everything. Which is impressive, because this is an episode of the show without the TARDIS. We don't see the TARDIS once. We don't see it at all in this episode. And, theoretically, we could get an entire season based on how this episode ends and potentially where we're going. It's possible this entire season, might not feature the TARDIS at all. I don't necessarily expect that, but I gotta say, if they went that way, if they went with that bold decision, I'd be okay, because I think with this production crew already, with these writers, with this cast, and with with this music, which is strong, unique, definitely stands out from Murray Gold, but is still very effective at helping build the emotion, I think we're in good hands, and I'm very optimistic for where the show goes from here. So, yeah, overall, I can't recommend The Woman Who Fell to Earth enough. As I said, if you're a lapsed fan, if you're a newcomer to Who, you can absolutely start with this episode. If you just want to get a taste of what Doctor Who has to offer, this is a perfect starting point. And you can follow along with the season, because we are in for a good run. It's new episodes of Doctor Who, I think, pretty much every week going forward until December 9th. It's a 10-episode season, so it's a little shorter in terms of episode count, but the episodes themselves are going to be a bit longer than we used to get, so it balances out, and then we will get, of course, the now traditional Christmas episode on December 25th, so it's really an 11-episode season, and we end this episode on a very fun, very engaging cliffhanger of sorts. Now, we've been told that there will be no multi-part episodes in this run, that this will be the first time ever that'll be true, that it's all going to be standalone episodes with no multi-parters. But clearly, based on the end of this episode at the very least, that isn't to say that storylines aren't going to continue and carry over. We get a very definite cliffhanger, and I would love it if every episode of the season ended in a similar way. It kind of calls back to the Doctor's old days, back when episodes of Doctor Who, storylines, or whatever you'd want to call them, would stretch out across multiple half-hour or so episodes, and so you'd get like a 4 or 5 part story, and of course that would mean at the end of each of the first 3 parts, you'd get some sort of attempt at a cliffhanger. Sometimes it'd be a really good cliffhanger. Sometimes not. This is a good one. And it looks like next episode, we're heading right into space. We're heading into an alien planet. So this is not going to be, even if we don't see the TARDIS again, this is not going to be an entirely Earth-bound season at the very least, which is good. Again, I think this cast, this crew could have pulled that off if they wanted. It's not like the Doctor didn't have a whole bunch of seasons. The original season 11, after all, well, actually, I think the original season 11, I think by that time we were getting more off of Earth. But point is, we could absolutely do that, but we're not, and that's fine. Like I said, overall, I'm in. Of course, that's not really a shock. Anybody who's a longtime watcher of the show knows, or my Twitter feed knows, I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, and this episode would have been pretty god-awful for me to go, nope, I'm done, I'm cutting out. And as I hopefully have established, it was anything but god-awful. But beyond that, it didn't just feel like more of the same. It felt like a proper Doctor Who episode, and yet it also felt like unlike any episode we've gotten before. As I said at the start, same but different, different but the same. That might as well be the motto for this series as a whole. And I'm glad that's continuing. I'm excited to see where Chibnall and the directors and writers who he's assembled to make this season, I'm really excited to see where they go. There's a lot of different directions. There's a lot of loose ends left to explore. There's we get signs that things are going to be fun, that we have a Doctor who's going to be, I think, a bit more empathetic. Wow. Empathetic than we've at times gotten. Although, of course, the 12th Doctor by the end was extremely empathetic. that's the thing is, you never quite know who the Doctor's going to end up. Go and look at the first couple episodes of the 10th Doctor, or the 9th Doctor, or the 12th Doctor, or the 11th Doctor, and then go look at a couple of the episodes later on in the run, and you will see that they're almost different characters in some ways. And I'm sure that will happen with Whittaker's Doctor as well. But the point is, the role is very much in wonderful, terrific hands, which is completely unsurprising to anybody who's seen Jodie Whittaker's work before. She brings a lot of warmth, a lot of character, a lot of oddness, a lot of quirkiness to the character. In short, she is the Doctor. And I feel the same way about Bradley Walsh, Tosin Cole, and Mandip Gill in the roles of Officer Yasmin Khan, Graham, the former bus driver, and Ryan Sinclair. These characters are all... They get off to a good start in this, and it seems like there's a lot of different directions we could go. I'm looking forward to seeing the interaction with them. And I like that they don't all feel the same. They each feel unique and distinct, both from each other, and really in a lot of ways from what's come before. They don't feel like, just even in this one episode, necessarily the kind of companions we would have gotten in the Moffat era or in the Russell T Davies era. And that's exactly the way it should be. So, overall, I'm very happy to have Doctor Who back, and I can't wait for the episodes to come. I can't wait for the 13th Doctor comic, which will be starting in a couple weeks. Basically, I'm so happy the Doctor's back. It felt like forever, but based on the strength of this episode, it was more than worth the wait. And that's going to do it for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. I definitely plan to cover the remaining episodes of this season of Doctor Who. As I said, I'm just not sure entirely how it's going to work out scheduling-wise, because I'm also planning, God help me, to cover Titans, launching, well, as of this recording, at the end of the week on the DC Universe app. I will admit, I am not approaching this with much optimism and definitely more trepidation than anything else, but I will do my best to be as impartial as you can be when doing something as non-objective as a review. I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to give the whole season a shot, even if it ends up being sheer agony. So, I'm going to be doing that as well. I don't know if that means 2 videos a week. I don't know if after I cover the first episode of Titans, I may wait and then cover multiple episodes of Titans and multiple episodes of Who in a single episode. I'm kind of playing the format by ear, partially based on as much as my non-day job time allows. But regardless, there will definitely be continued coverage of these shows and others, hopefully. I've definitely got other things in the works. I'm possibly going to do something for Halloween. If I can pull it off, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. May have to wait till next year. But regardless, there's more stuff coming, and hopefully not another break nearly this long. So, then, until next time, everyone, as always, this is Shaun Cronenfeld for Unrepentant Geeking, wishing you all long days and pleasant nights.